A weathered red helmet, half buried in fallen pine needles, shouldn't have been there. Not in that remote section of Blackwood Forest, miles from any hiking trail. But on that crisp autumn morning in 2011, 3 hunters stumbled upon exactly that. A firefighter's helmet with the faded number 86 and a name still barely legible beneath years of weathering. Martinez. For the small town of Pinecrest, that single discovery would unravel a mystery that had haunted them for 25 years. Before we dive into this mystery, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what you think happened. Your opinion could be the key to understanding this story. The morning had started like any other for the Blackwood Hunting Club's annual expedition. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and decaying leaves, the kind of cold that made breath visible and fingers stiff around rifle stocks. Veteran hunter Mike Donovan led his brother-in-law and nephew deeper into the forest than they'd ever ventured before, tracking an 8-point buck they'd spotted at dawn. "I saw something red through the trees," Mike later told investigators, his voice still trembling during the recorded interview. "Thought it might be another hunter. But when we got closer..." His voice always trailed off at this point, as if the reality of what they found still shocked him months later. The helmet wasn't just any firefighter's equipment. It belonged to Ray Martinez, Pinecrest's most decorated firefighter, a local hero who had vanished without a trace during a routine forest patrol in the summer of 1986. The disappearance had triggered the largest search in county history. Hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, trained dogs, all yielding nothing but questions. The town had eventually moved on, but one person never did. Elena Martinez, Ray's daughter, who was just 15 when her father disappeared. Now a forest ranger herself, she had spent her adult life searching the same woods that had seemingly swallowed her father. "I remember the call like it was yesterday," Elena told me, sitting in her modest ranger station office, walls covered with maps of Blackwood Forest, marked with meticulous search grids. 25 years of wondering, and suddenly there was something concrete, something real. But what the hunters found that day was just the beginning. Why was the helmet nearly 5 miles from where Ray was last reported? And why, when forensics examined it, did they find traces of concrete dust and chemical residues that had no business being in a natural forest? What if this was just the first piece of an even bigger puzzle? As investigators would soon discover, Blackwood Forest had been hiding more than just wildlife and vegetation for the past 2 decades. And the peaceful town of Pinecrest harbored secrets that some very powerful people had worked very hard to keep buried. But secrets, like bodies, rarely stay buried forever. Ray Martinez wasn't just another firefighter in Pinecrest. He was the firefighter, the man whose portrait hung in the town hall, whose name adorned the fire station's training room. The summer before his disappearance, he had rushed into Pinewood Elementary as flames consumed the East Wing, carrying out 3 children when everyone else thought it was too late. He had this intuition, said Frank Reeves, former fire chief, now in his 80s, hands shaking as he nursed a black coffee in Pinecrest's only diner. Ray could sense things about fires that nobody else could. He'd say, "Don't go in that room," seconds before a ceiling collapsed. Or he'd insist we check one more closet and find someone unconscious from smoke. The walls of Reeves's home are still adorned with faded photographs of Ray. Always in uniform, always with that half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. But there was another side to Ray Martinez that few in Pinecrest knew about. "Dad was complicated," Elena explained, flipping through a worn photo album she kept in her desk drawer. "He was so open with everyone in town, but at home, there were these silences. Topics we never discussed. His childhood, the time before he came to Pinecrest. Even Mom didn't know everything." Records showed that Ray Martinez appeared in Pinecrest in 1968, already a trained firefighter, though requests to his supposed former department in Arizona yielded no records. He married local schoolteacher Maria Conley within a year, And Elena was born 2 years later. He was the perfect father, Elena said, her fingers tracing a Christmas photo. Patient, kind, present. But sometimes I'd catch him staring out into the forest with this look, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. The morning Ray disappeared began routinely. Summer of '86 had been unusually dry, and the fire department was conducting daily patrols during the high-risk season. Ray radioed in from Checkpoint 7 at 10:13 a.m. His voice was calm, reporting all clear. At 10:42 a.m., he missed his scheduled check-in at Checkpoint 8. By noon, 3 search parties were combing the forest. "I remember the sound of helicopters," said Patrick Doyle, who was 10 that summer. For weeks, that constant thudding overhead. Adults whispering when kids walked by. The forest was off limits. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. But what if Ray Martinez wanted to disappear? What if the town's hero had reasons to vanish that went beyond a simple accident in the woods? As we'd soon discover, the helmet wasn't the only thing buried in Blackwood Forest. And for some in Pinecrest, the past was about to come knocking with bloody knuckles. Elena Martinez's living room walls told a story of obsession. Topographical maps of Blackwood Forest covered every available surface, marked with colored pins, string, and handwritten notes. 25 years of searching had transformed from a daughter's desperate hope into something more methodical, almost scientific. "People called me crazy," Elena said, eyes fixed on her father's badge, preserved in a small glass case on her mantel. "Eventually, they stopped saying it to my face, but I could see it in their eyes." Poor Elena, still chasing ghosts. But Elena hadn't just been wandering aimlessly through the forest for a quarter-century. She had systematically divided Blackwood into search grids, documenting each expedition with photographs, soil samples, and detailed notes. She'd learned tracking from local hunters, studied forensic science through online courses, and taken the job as forest ranger specifically to gain unlimited access to the woods. "I found things over the years," she admitted, pulling out a metal filing cabinet filled with labeled evidence bags. A button from what could have been his uniform. A piece of radio equipment that matched the model he carried. But nothing conclusive. Nothing that proved I wasn't crazy. Until the helmet. The morning after Mike Donovan's discovery, Elena stood in the clearing where the helmet was found, the cold air burning her lungs as she hyperventilated. Sheriff Tom Bradley, who'd been a rookie deputy during the original disappearance, placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You were right," he said simply. Words she'd waited half her life to hear. But the location made no sense. Checkpoint 8, where Ray had been heading when he disappeared, was 5 miles northwest. The search parties had concentrated there, in the logical direction of his patrol route. This area had barely been searched. "It was like finding a ship in the desert," Elena explained. "Dad had no reason to be here. This wasn't on any patrol route." The helmet itself raised more questions than it answered. The concrete dust puzzled investigators. The chemical residue was identified as a compound used in early Cold War-era constructions, specifically military bunkers. "There are no bunkers in Blackwood Forest," Sheriff Bradley insisted during a press conference. But his eyes shifted away from the cameras as he spoke. That evening, as Elena was photographing the site for her personal records, she noticed something the official investigation had missed, a faint impression in the soil pattern surrounding where the helmet had been found. "The ground had been disturbed," she said, showing me the photographs. "Not recently, but years ago, in a perfect circle, about 8 feet in diameter. Like something buried, or something hidden." What was Ray Martinez doing in that remote section of the forest? And why had it taken 25 years for any trace of him to surface? The answers would shake Pinecrest to its foundations. The news of the helmet's discovery spread through Pinecrest like wildfire, and not everyone welcomed the rekindled investigation. Former Mayor Harold Kingsley, now 83, canceled 3 scheduled interviews with local press. Former city manager Philip Reese suddenly left for an extended vacation to visit family in Florida. And former fire commissioner William Strauss was found dead in his garage 2 days after the helmet was found. Carbon monoxide poisoning ruled as suicide. But what if these weren't coincidences? Something changed in town after Dad disappeared, Elena recalled, sitting on her porch as the sun set over Blackwood Forest. For weeks, there was this intense search, this community unity. Then suddenly, it just stopped. Mayor Kingsley announced they were scaling back. Resources were limited. Life needed to return to normal. A review of town council minutes from August 1986 revealed heated debate about continuing the search. Recordings of these meetings, requested under Freedom of Information laws, were mysteriously damaged beyond recovery, according to current town officials. Sheriff Bradley, now leading the reopened investigation, faced unexpected resistance from the very department he headed. There's a lot of sentiment that we shouldn't be digging up the past, he admitted during our third interview, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. Budget concerns, they say, but it feels like something else. The sheriff's suspicions deepened when the forensic team he'd assembled was suddenly reassigned by County Commissioner James Walton, son-in-law of former Mayor Kingsley. "They're closing ranks," whispered Donna Lewis, town librarian for over 30 years. She passed a folder across her desk with trembling hands. "I've kept these newspaper clippings from the summer before Ray disappeared, about the new fire station budget." The yellowed newsprint documented a controversy largely forgotten. Ray Martinez had publicly questioned the construction costs of Pinecrest's new fire station, suggesting funds were being misappropriated. Mayor Kingsley had dismissed the concerns as the overzealous accusations of someone who doesn't understand municipal finance. 3 months later, Ray Martinez vanished in Blackwood Forest. "Dad wasn't just a firefighter," Elena said later, connecting these dots for the first time. "He was on the town council. He had access to budgets, contracts. He asked questions." As the investigation into the helmet discovery continued, Sheriff Bradley received an anonymous envelope containing a single sheet of paper. A bank statement from 1986 showing a deposit of $75,000 into Mayor Kingsley's personal account, dated 1 week after the search for Ray was officially abandoned. But who sent this evidence? And why now, after 25 years? The answer would come from the most unexpected source, and would finally give Elena the breakthrough she had spent her adult life searching for. 8 weeks after the helmet's discovery, Elena Martinez stood at the edge of a massive excavation in Blackwood Forest. Heavy machinery had cleared away decades of soil and vegetation, revealing what state officials were now reluctantly confirming. A Cold War-era bunker, unmarked on any official map, hidden beneath the forest floor. But how could a military installation exist without the town's knowledge? "These shelters were built in secret," explained Dr. Nathan Harris, historian specializing in Cold War infrastructure. Often, local officials were given minimal information. Some were told they were water treatment facilities or emergency communications centers. Some weren't told anything at all. The entrance to the bunker, a massive circular hatch like something from a submarine, corresponded exactly to the soil disturbance pattern Elena had photographed. For 25 years, it had been hidden beneath a carefully constructed layer of earth and plantation foliage, invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for it. "I came here dozens of times," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the idling engines of excavation equipment. "I stood right on top of it and never knew." Initial exploration of the bunker revealed something extraordinary. Someone had been living there. Recently. "We found living quarters," confirmed FBI Agent Samantha Cross, called in when the bunker's discovery elevated the case to federal jurisdiction. "Preserved food, water filtration systems, a generator. This wasn't abandoned after the Cold War. Someone maintained it, used it." The most disturbing discovery came from a small side room that appeared to serve as an office. Pinned to the walls were hundreds of newspaper clippings, photographs, and documents, all related to Pinecrest's town administration from 1984 to 2006. Many featured Mayor Kingsley, City Manager Reese, and other officials. Red string connected certain articles with handwritten notes in the margins. In the center of this web of information, a photograph of Ray Martinez. It looked like one of those crime boards you see in movies, Sheriff Bradley later described. Like someone had been building a case, gathering evidence. But evidence of what? The answer came from a waterproof case found secured beneath the metal desk. Inside, financial records, contracts, and correspondence documenting over 2 decades of corruption in Pinecrest. Embezzlement of federal funds meant for municipal projects, bribes from contractors, evidence that millions of dollars had been siphoned by the old guard that had run the town for decades. Most damning was a memo dated June 12, 1986, 1 month before Ray's disappearance, in which Mayor Kingsley discussed the Martinez problem with Fire Commissioner Strauss, writing ominously, "He's found something. We need to contain this situation before it escalates." But the bunker held one more secret, one that would break Elena's heart even as it confirmed what she had always believed. Her father hadn't simply vanished. In a small alcove behind a false wall, a firefighter's jacket with the name Martinez still clearly visible on the back. But no body, no remains, nothing to indicate Ray Martinez had died in that bunker. "He was here," Elena said, clutching the jacket. "He was alive. But where is he now?" Former Mayor Harold Kingsley sat in the interrogation room of the Pinecrest Sheriff's Station, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frail frame, his eyes fixed on the table. At 83, he looked every day of his age, and then some, as the evidence found in the bunker was laid out before him. "I didn't want any part in what happened to Ray," he finally said, his voice cracking. "You have to understand the times, the pressure we were under." Sheriff Bradley let the recording equipment capture every word as Kingsley began his confession. A story that had festered inside him for 25 years. "We were skimming from federal grants," Kingsley admitted. "Infrastructure money, disaster preparedness funds. It started small in the 70s, a little here, a little there. But by 86, we had a system. Dummy contractors, inflated invoices. The new fire station was supposed to be our biggest payday." Ray Martinez, as both firefighter and council member, had noticed discrepancies in the construction costs. Equipment ordered but never delivered. Safety features listed in contracts but never installed. He'd begun his own investigation, gathering documents, taking photographs of construction that didn't match approved plans. "He confronted me privately first," Kingsley continued, tears welling in his rheumy eyes. "Said he'd go to the county, maybe the feds, but he gave me a chance to come clean." I panicked. I told Strauss and Reese. What happened next was Strauss's idea, according to Kingsley. They knew about the old bunker, a relic from the 50s that had been officially decommissioned but remained on classified maps. Strauss had served in the military and retained connections. He suggested using the bunker to contain Martinez until they figured out what to do. "It was supposed to be temporary," Kingsley insisted, his hands shaking. "Just to scare him, to buy us time." Strauss and 2 men he hired intercepted Ray during his patrol. They were just going to hold him a few days. But something went wrong. One of Strauss's men got rough. Ray fought back. In the struggle, he was struck in the head. Hard enough that they feared he was dead or seriously injured. "When Strauss called me, I thought he was telling me they'd killed Ray," Kingsley said. "I authorized whatever was necessary to cover it up. The helmet must have been lost during the struggle or the transport to the bunker. But according to Kingsley, Ray Martinez didn't die that day. 3 days later, Strauss told me Ray had regained consciousness. That changed everything. We couldn't just let him go, not after what we'd done, but none of us had the stomach for murder." Their solution was as elegant as it was cruel. They gave Ray a choice: disappear forever, leave his family, his life in Pinecrest behind, or evidence of corruption would be planted in his own financial records, and his wife and daughter would suffer the consequences of his crimes. "We thought he'd take his chances with the law," Kingsley said, his voice barely audible. "But he loved his family too much. He chose to disappear." The officials provided Ray with supplies and locked him in the bunker while they arranged his permanent relocation. But when Strauss returned a week later with false identification documents, the bunker was empty. Ray Martinez had somehow escaped. "We launched the search parties as cover," Kingsley confessed. "We were trying to find him before he could reach the authorities. But he vanished. For years, we lived in fear that he'd resurface, that he'd expose everything. But he never did." Sheriff Bradley leaned forward, his voice tight with controlled fury. "And you just let his family suffer? Let them believe he might be dead? For 25 years? Kingsley finally looked up, his eyes hollow with decades of guilt. "We told ourselves he must have contacted them secretly, that he wouldn't leave them wondering. It was easier to believe that than face what we'd done." But Elena Martinez had never received any message from her father. For 25 years, she had searched for a man who had chosen an impossible sacrifice to protect her. The question now burned more urgently than ever. If Ray Martinez had escaped the bunker alive, where had he been for the past 25 years? And more importantly, was he still alive? 2 days after Kingsley's confession, a letter arrived at the Pinecrest Sheriff's Office, addressed simply to Elena Martinez. The postmark showed it had been mailed from Seattle, Washington, 3 days before the helmet was even discovered. Inside was a single page of unlined paper with 3 sentences typed in the center. The helmet was meant to be found. "Look closer at Checkpoint 4. You've grown into exactly who I hoped you would be." The letter bore no signature, but the sheriff's office immediately sent it for forensic analysis. The results defied explanation. Partial fingerprints on the paper matched samples taken from Ray Martinez's personal effects, preserved by Elena. Fingerprints that had been collected over 25 years ago. "This is impossible," Agent Cross stated flatly, staring at the fingerprint comparison charts. "These prints are recent. They can't belong to a man who disappeared a quarter-century ago." But DNA analysis of skin cells found on the envelope told the same impossible story. Ray Martinez, or someone sharing his exact genetic profile, had sent this letter and had somehow known the helmet would be found before it actually was. For Elena, the letter's contents were more significant than its forensics. "Checkpoint 4 was always special to Dad," she explained, already preparing her gear for another forest expedition. "It's where he taught me about tracking when I was little. Said it was the heart of the forest." The following morning, Elena led a small team including Sheriff Bradley and Agent Cross to Checkpoint 4, a small clearing about 3 miles into Blackwood Forest, marked only by a weather-beaten ranger post. To the untrained eye, there was nothing remarkable about the location. But Elena knew better. "Dad used to say, 'Nature hides in plain sight,'" she recalled, scanning the ground carefully. "He taught me that the forest has layers, just like people." Her methodical search led to a hollow oak tree at the clearing's edge. Reaching deep inside the trunk, Elena's fingers found a small metal box, a waterproof container military personnel use to protect crucial documents. Inside, a USB drive, a key with no identifying marks, and a faded photograph of Elena at her high school graduation, an event that occurred 7 years after Ray's disappearance. "He was there," Elena whispered, tracing the photograph with trembling fingers. "He saw me graduate." The USB drive contained hundreds of files, meticulously documented evidence of corruption dating from 1975 to 2006. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographs of clandestine meetings. Most crucially, it contained video footage of a meeting between Kingsley, Strauss, and Reese discussing their plan to handle the Martinez situation permanently. This is why he didn't come forward, Agent Cross realized. He wasn't just gathering evidence about the financial crimes. He was documenting a conspiracy to commit murder. His own murder. But the key remained a mystery. A modern, precision-cut key that matched no locks in either the bunker or any of the implicated officials' properties. As the investigation team analyzed these new discoveries, another letter arrived at Elena's home. This one hand-delivered to her mailbox overnight, with no postal markings. The cabin waits where 3 pines stand as one. Come alone if you want the full truth. They're still watching. Trust only Bradley. The handwriting matched Ray Martinez's personnel file samples with 98.7% certainty. Elena's father wasn't just alive. He was reaching out, and he was close. But why now, after 25 years of silence? And who was still watching? The morning after receiving the second letter, Elena arrived at the sheriff's office to find the place in chaos. Overnight, the evidence room had been breached. The only items taken, Ray's helmet, the USB drive, and the mysterious key. This isn't a coincidence, Sheriff Bradley stated grimly, reviewing security footage that showed only a black screen during the crucial 20-minute period of the break-in. Someone with access and expertise did this. The theft confirmed Ray's warning. They were still being watched. But who remained from the old conspiracy with both the means and motivation to obstruct justice after 25 years? The answer emerged from an unexpected quarter. Donna Lewis, the town librarian who had provided the newspaper clippings, was found unconscious in her home that same morning, an apparent stroke, according to paramedics. But at the hospital, toxicology tests revealed a sophisticated neurotoxin in her system, one typically associated with intelligence operations. This is bigger than small-town corruption, Agent Cross concluded, ordering protection for all witnesses and moving Elena to a safe house outside town limits. This level of sophistication suggests something more organized. While Elena chafed at the protective custody, Sheriff Bradley delved deeper into the backgrounds of everyone connected to the case. His investigation led to a startling discovery. William Strauss, the former fire commissioner who had supposedly died by suicide, had served not just in the military as Kingsley claimed, but specifically in a classified program tied to domestic intelligence operations during the Cold War. Strauss wasn't just a corrupt official, Bradley explained, spreading personnel files across the safe house table. He had connections to people who specialized in making problems disappear. A deeper background check on Strauss revealed offshore accounts still active years after his supposed death. Transactions showed regular payments to 3 former military contractors, all with training in covert operations. The most recent payment had been processed just 2 days after the helmet's discovery. Strauss faked his death, Elena realized. He's alive, and he's trying to bury this again. The phrase from Ray's letter, "where 3 pines stand as one," now took on urgent significance. If they could find this location before Strauss's operatives did, they might finally reach Ray Martinez. It's a landmark in the northwestern section, Elena suddenly remembered, pulling out her maps. A place where 3 pine trees grew so close together they fused at the base. Dad used to say it was nature's lesson about strength and unity. But the landmark wasn't on any official forest map. It existed only in the personal knowledge of those who knew Blackwood Forest intimately, like a veteran firefighter and his ranger daughter. As plans were made to locate the cabin, Sheriff Bradley received a troubling call from a deputy checking on former Mayor Kingsley. The elderly man had vanished from his home, leaving behind signs of struggle and a spray of blood on his kitchen wall. "They're tying up loose ends," Agent Cross warned. "Anyone who knows the truth is in danger." The race to find Ray Martinez had suddenly become deadly, not just to uncover the truth about the past, but to save lives in the present. That night, Elena slipped away from the safe house, leaving a note for Sheriff Bradley. "I know where to look. He's my father. I have to do this alone." She headed into Blackwood Forest with only her ranger gear and a lifetime of determination, unaware that multiple shadows were converging on the same hidden destination. Dawn broke over Blackwood Forest as Elena navigated terrain she knew better than anyone else alive, except perhaps her father. The northwestern section was the most remote, accessible only by game trails and forgotten logging paths, perfect for someone who wanted to remain hidden. The morning mist clung to the forest floor, transforming familiar landmarks into ghostly silhouettes. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves raised the hair on Elena's neck. Was she being followed? Or was it just the forest's natural symphony? After 3 hours of hiking, she spotted it. The botanical anomaly her father had shown her as a child. 3 massive pine trees that had grown so close together their trunks had partially fused, creating the appearance of a single massive tree split into 3 at about 7 feet up. Nature finds a way to adapt, Ray had told her during that long-ago forest lesson, sometimes becoming stronger through adversity. Beyond the landmark, nestled in a small clearing invisible from any established trail, stood a simple wooden cabin. No smoke rose from its chimney. No sign of movement disturbed the stillness surrounding it. Elena approached cautiously, hand resting on the small canister of bear spray at her belt, the only weapon she carried. The cabin's windows were covered from the inside with what appeared to be heavy fabric, preventing any view of the interior. The front door bore a sophisticated electronic lock, incongruously modern against the rustic structure. The mysterious key from the hollow tree would fit here, but Elena no longer had the key. As she contemplated her next move, a voice spoke from behind her. A voice she hadn't heard in 25 years, now roughened by age but unmistakable. "You followed the breadcrumbs, just like I knew you would." Elena turned slowly, tears already blurring her vision, to face an elderly man with a full white beard and deeply lined face. Despite the years, she recognized him instantly. "Dad?" Ray Martinez looked nothing like the strong, confident firefighter from her childhood. Time had bent his once straight posture. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, likely from the attack Kingsley had described. But his eyes were the same, alert, intelligent, and now brimming with tears of his own. "I always watched over you, Elena," he said, his voice breaking. "Even when I couldn't be there. Especially when I couldn't be there." Their reunion was cut short by the unmistakable sound of a helicopter approaching, too close and too deliberate to be coincidence. Ray's expression hardened. "They found us faster than I expected. We need to get inside. Now." From his pocket, he produced a key identical to the one that had been stolen from the evidence room. "I've spent 25 years planning for this moment," Ray explained as he unlocked the cabin door. "Always have a backup." Inside, the cabin's rustic exterior proved to be an effective disguise. The interior was a sophisticated command center, with computer equipment, communications devices, and walls covered with the same type of investigative materials found in the bunker, but updated, expanded, and organized with military precision. "After I escaped the bunker, I realized the conspiracy went beyond Pinecrest," Ray explained hurriedly as he secured the door and activated what appeared to be a jamming system. Strauss was connected to people in federal agencies, private military contractors, people who specialized in making problems disappear. The helicopter sound intensified, then diminished as it passed overhead. "They're looking for a landing spot," Ray said grimly. "We have maybe 15 minutes." He moved to a section of wall covered with photographs and documents concerning William Strauss. 102 floors. Situat. Strauss faked his death when the helmet was found. He knew it would eventually lead to the bunker, to the evidence. But he doesn't know about this place, about everything else I've gathered. Ray pressed a hidden switch, revealing a concealed safe behind the investigation board. From it, he removed a hard drive and a sealed envelope. "Tight! This contains everything. Names, dates, account numbers. The complete network Strauss built, using the money they embezzled. It goes all the way to federal contractors, intelligence operatives who went private after the Cold War ended." The sound of approaching vehicles reached them, engines working hard on the uneven forest terrain. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Elena asked, the question that had burned inside her for half her life. Ray's weathered face crumpled with regret. "They threatened you and your mother. Explicitly, and they had the means to follow through. I needed absolute proof against everyone involved before I could risk contact." The approaching engines cut off. Voices could now be heard outside, men coordinating their positions around the cabin. "I thought I had more time," Ray said, pressing the hard drive and envelope into Elena's hands. "This needs to reach Agent Cross. The FBI can't ignore this level of evidence." "We'll both deliver it," Elena insisted, clutching his arm. "I'm not losing you again." Ray shook his head sadly. "There's something I haven't told you. Something I couldn't put in any message." Outside, someone called through a bullhorn. "Raymond Martinez, we have the perimeter secured. There's no escape this time." Ray moved to a cabinet and removed a worn fireproof case. Inside, medical supplies surrounded numerous prescription medication bottles. "The reason I finally reached out," he said quietly, "is because I'm running out of time. Terminal pancreatic cancer. 3 months. Maybe less." Elena staggered as if physically struck. To find her father, only to learn she would lose him again. It was too cruel to comprehend. "That's why it has to be you who carries this forward," Ray continued, indicating a small trap door hidden beneath a rug. "This leads to a tunnel that comes out half a mile away. Take the evidence. I'll keep them occupied." "I'm not leaving you," Elena protested, even as the first demands to open the door were punctuated by heavy pounding. Ray Martinez looked at his daughter with fierce pride. "You never did give up. Not in 25 years. He pressed a small device into her hand alongside the evidence. "A beacon. Sheriff Bradley has the receiver. Press it when you're clear." Before Elena could argue further, the front windows shattered as smoke grenades were launched into the cabin. "Beam. Go!" Ray ordered, pushing her toward the trap door. "My story is ending. Make sure the truth doesn't end with me." With tears streaming down her face, Elena Martinez did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She left her father behind a second time, clutching the evidence that would finally bring justice, both for him and because of him. As she crawled through the narrow escape tunnel, she heard her father's voice call out to the men surrounding his cabin. "William, I've been waiting 25 years for this conversation." Then the sound of the trapdoor closing sealed her off from whatever would happen next. Sheriff Tom Bradley was furious. Elena had disappeared from the safe house overnight, leaving him with nothing but a cryptic note. Now, 7 hours later, his phone buzzed with a signal from a tracking device he didn't even know existed until a text arrived from an unknown number. "Martinez emergency transponder activated. Coordinates attached." He moved immediately, calling in every available deputy and alerting Agent Cross, who was investigating the break-in at the evidence room. 20 minutes later, a convoy of law enforcement vehicles was racing toward the remote coordinates in Blackwood Forest. "No sirens," Bradley ordered as they approached the area. "We don't know what we're walking into." What they found was Elena Martinez, exhausted and dirt-covered, emerging from the forest underbrush onto a seldom-used fire road. In her hands, she clutched a hard drive and a sealed envelope. "My father," she gasped, collapsing into Bradley's arms. "They have my father at the cabin. Strauss is there." While paramedics attended to Elena, Bradley coordinated with Agent Cross, who called in FBI tactical support. But the heavy forest terrain meant it would take time for the teams to reach the remote cabin. Time Ray Martinez might not have. "I'm going in with my deputies," Bradley decided, checking his sidearm. "Cross, you stay with Elena and secure that evidence." "Take this," Elena said, handing Bradley a hand-drawn map. "The cabin has 2 entrances and multiple windows. Dad designed it with defensive positions in mind." As Bradley led his team toward the cabin, Agent Cross examined the evidence Elena had delivered. The hard drive would require technical specialists, But the sealed envelope contained something immediately actionable. A confession letter from Strauss, written years earlier as insurance against his associates, detailing the entire conspiracy and naming every participant, including 3 current federal officials who had helped cover up the original crimes. This goes beyond Pinecrest, Cross realized, immediately making encrypted calls to her superiors. This is a federal corruption case spanning decades. Meanwhile, Bradley and his deputies approached the cabin clearing to find a tense standoff already in progress. 2 black SUVs were parked haphazardly near the structure. Armed men in tactical gear surrounded the building, while a white-haired man in expensive civilian clothing spoke into a bullhorn. "Chantweetwutiturn. It ends today, Ray. You've had your last 25 years. More than you deserved." Bradley recognized the voice immediately. William Strauss, the supposedly deceased former fire commissioner. From within the cabin, Ray Martinez's voice called back. "Exactly 25 years, 3 months, and 14 days since you left me for dead in that bunker. I've counted every single one, William." Bradley positioned his deputies at the forest's edge, using the trees as cover. They were outnumbered and outgunned by Strauss's mercenaries, but they had the element of surprise, for now. Inside the cabin, Ray Martinez sat calmly at his desk, facing the shattered front windows. The smoke from the grenades had mostly cleared, leaving the air hazy but breathable. His hands rested on the desktop, clearly visible and empty. On the wall behind him, a blank space showed where his most incriminating evidence had hung until recently. "You should have stayed hidden, Ray," Strauss called, his voice carrying a tremor of either age or nerves. "We were willing to let you live out your days in exile." "We both know that's not true," Ray replied evenly. "You've had people hunting me for 25 years. The only reason I'm alive is because I was better at hiding than your people were at finding." Outside, Sheriff Bradley had completed positioning his deputies. With hand signals, he coordinated their targeting of Strauss's men. But before they could act, the forest erupted with new arrivals. FBI tactical teams had arrived faster than expected, surrounding the entire clearing. "Federal agents!" Cross's voice boomed through professional amplification equipment. "Lower your weapons! You are surrounded!" Chaos erupted as Strauss's mercenaries assessed their options. 2 immediately dropped their weapons. Others took cover behind the SUVs, weapons raised. Strauss himself seemed frozen in disbelief, the bullhorn hanging limply at his side. Then, with remarkable speed for a man his age, he sprinted toward the cabin door. "Free! He's making a move on the cabin!" Bradley shouted into his radio. "He's going after Martinez!" Inside, Ray heard the commotion but remained seated. He had spent 25 years preparing for this moment. When Strauss burst through the door, pistol in hand, Ray didn't flinch. "It was never about the money for you, was it, William?" Ray asked quietly, as Strauss leveled the gun at him. "It was about control, about power." "You could have just kept your head down," Strauss hissed, his hand shaking slightly. "You had to play the hero." Outside, gunfire erupted as one of the mercenaries decided to fight rather than surrender. The FBI tactical team responded with overwhelming force, and within moments, the shooting stopped. But inside the cabin, another drama reached its climax. "I am a firefighter," Ray said, his voice carrying the strength and conviction of his younger self. "My job was to protect people, even from threats they couldn't see." Strauss's finger tightened on the trigger, just as Sheriff Bradley crashed through the side door, weapon drawn. "Drop it, Strauss!" Bradley ordered. The former commissioner's head snapped toward the new threat. In that split second of distraction, Ray Martinez lunged across the desk with surprising speed, catching Strauss's gun hand and forcing it upward. A shot discharged into the ceiling as the 2 elderly men grappled with the desperate energy of their decades-long vendetta. Bradley couldn't get a clear shot as they struggled. He edged closer, looking for an opening. "This ends now," Ray grunted, using leverage. Techniques that suggested military training beyond that of a typical firefighter. With a final surge of strength, he twisted Strauss's arm and forced him face down onto the desk, the gun clattering to the floor. 25 years, Ray gasped, the exertion clearly taxing his cancer-weakened body. 25 years of my life, my daughter's childhood. My wife died never knowing the truth. Sheriff Bradley quickly moved in to secure Strauss with handcuffs. "William Strauss, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, assault, kidnapping, and faking your own death to avoid prosecution. That's just for starters." As Bradley recited the Miranda rights, Ray Martinez slowly sank into his chair, suddenly looking every minute of his 72 years, and more. "Are you okay?" Bradley asked, noticing Ray's pallor. "I'll be fine," Ray replied, though his labored breathing suggested otherwise. "Is Elena safe?" "She's safe," Bradley confirmed. "And the evidence she carried out of here is already being processed by the FBI." Ray nodded, a weight visibly lifting from his shoulders. Then it was worth it. All of it. Outside, FBI agents secured the scene as Agent Cross coordinated the collection of additional evidence from the cabin. Elena, against medical advice, had refused to stay behind, and now pushed through the controlled chaos toward the cabin, desperate to reach her father. Inside, Ray Martinez reached into his pocket and removed a small photograph. Elena as a teenager, the same image found in the hollow tree box. "I took this from half a mile away, using a telephoto lens," he told Bradley. "Her graduation. I couldn't be there properly, but I couldn't miss it either." The cabin door burst open as Elena rushed in, ignoring the protests of agents trying to maintain scene security. Her eyes locked with her father's across the room. In that moment, 25 years of searching, hoping, and wondering crystallized into a single truth. Sometimes justice takes a lifetime, but the truth eventually finds its way into the light. The conference room at the FBI field office in Portland buzzed with activity. 3 days had passed since the standoff at the cabin, and the evidence Ray Martinez had gathered over 25 years was proving explosive. 6 federal arrests had already been made, with more expected as the investigation expanded. Elena sat beside her father, who looked simultaneously diminished and unburdened. His cancer treatments had been resumed at a Portland hospital, but both father and daughter knew they were buying time rather than offering hope. "The prosecutors want to know if you're strong enough to testify," Agent Cross said gently, placing a cup of water before Ray. "Given your condition." "I'll testify," Ray interrupted firmly. "I've waited 25 years to tell my story in a courtroom. I won't miss that chance, even if it's the last thing I do." Elena squeezed her father's hand, her heart breaking anew at the reminder of how little time they had left. The door opened, and Sheriff Bradley entered with a thin file folder. His expression was impossible to read. "The forensics team finished their analysis of the cabin and surrounding area," he reported, taking a seat across from Ray and Elena. "They found something interesting buried about 50 yards from the structure. Something you never mentioned, Ray." He opened the folder to reveal photographs of a weathered metal box. Inside, a complete identity package, passport, driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, all bearing Ray's photograph, but the name Michael Reeves. "You had an escape plan," Bradley stated. "A way to disappear permanently, to start over somewhere new. Yet you stayed in those woods, practically in Pinecrest's backyard, for 25 years. Why?" Ray glanced at Elena before answering. "I couldn't leave her unprotected. Strauss's reach was too extensive. If I'd disappeared completely, there would be nothing stopping them from tying up loose ends, including my family." "So you became the watcher in the woods," Agent Cross realized, "gathering evidence while keeping an eye on your daughter from a distance." Ray nodded slowly. "At first I planned to gather enough evidence quickly, then come forward. But the conspiracy was larger than I initially understood. Every thread I pulled revealed more connections, more powerful people involved. By the time I had enough to be certain of success, Elena was grown. Maria had died. And then, he gestured vaguely at his frail body. Then time started running out in a different way. The full weight of her father's sacrifice settled over Elena. 25 years of solitude. 25 years of watching life happen from a distance. There's something else, Bradley said, producing a second folder. We finished interviewing former Mayor Kingsley. He was held captive at a remote property owned by one of Strauss's associates, but he's physically unharmed. Inside this folder were transcripts of Kingsley's new statement, one that contradicted a crucial detail from his earlier confession. He claims they never gave you a choice about disappearing, Bradley said to Ray, that after you regained consciousness in the bunker, they immediately planned to eliminate you permanently. But you escaped before they could carry out the plan. Ray's expression remained neutral. Does it matter now? The end result was the same. It matters for the charges, Agent Cross explained, and for the historical record. Ray leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Kingsley was always the weakest of them, the most easily manipulated. Strauss was the true architect, and he absolutely offered me a choice. Disappear, or my family would suffer. I chose to protect my family. A heavy silence fell over the room. The magnitude of the injustice, a good man forced into exile for 25 years, was difficult to comprehend. The U.S. Attorney wants to make a formal apology, Agent Cross said finally. The corruption reached into federal agencies that should have protected you. They're talking about a formal ceremony, possible compensation for the years lost. Ray waved his hand dismissively. I don't need ceremonies or money. I need two things: justice for those responsible, and... He turned to Elena, his voice softening. In time with my daughter. Whatever's left. As the meeting concluded, arrangements were made for Ray's continuing medical care and security protection until the trials began. The case was drawing national attention, with 3 major news networks already producing special reports on the firefighter who came back from the dead. Outside the federal building, Elena helped her father into a waiting car that would take them to his next medical appointment. 25 years in the woods, she said quietly as they pulled away from the curb. You could have gone anywhere. Built a new life. Ray gazed out at the city streets, a world that had changed dramatically during his exile. I was never alone in those woods, he replied. I had my purpose. I had my memories, and I had you to watch over, even from a distance. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I spent my whole adult life searching for you. And now that I've found you... Ray took her hand. Now we make whatever time we have left count. The truth is finally free, and so are we. As their car navigated the busy streets, neither father nor daughter noticed the dark sedan that pulled into traffic several cars behind them. A vehicle registered to a company with connections to the few conspiracy members still at large. The price of truth was high, and the final bill had not yet been paid in full. Autumn returned to Pinecrest a year after the discovery of the helmet. The trees of Blackwood Forest blazed with color, their beauty untouched by the dark secrets they had harbored for so long. The town itself had changed profoundly. The corruption scandal had made national headlines for months. Former officials faced federal charges. The current administration, led by Mayor Sarah Donovan, daughter of Mike Donovan who had found the helmet, worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and transparency. On this crisp October morning, residents gathered in the town square for an unusual ceremony. At its center stood a simple monument of polished black granite. Etched into its surface was the outline of a firefighter's helmet, and the words, Ray Martinez, Guardian of Truth. He never stopped watching over us. Elena Martinez stood before the assembled crowd, her father's firefighter badge pinned to her forest ranger uniform. 3 months had passed since Ray Martinez had finally succumbed to his cancer, just 1 week after testifying against William Strauss in federal court. He had lived just long enough to see justice begin. My father once told me that being a firefighter wasn't just about running into burning buildings, Elena began, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. It was about protecting people from dangers they might not even see. For 25 years, he continued that mission from the shadows, gathering evidence of corruption that threatened not just our town, but our trust in government itself. Among the crowd, Sheriff Bradley stood at attention, his department now recognized nationally for their role in unraveling the conspiracy. Beside him, Agent Cross represented the federal agencies still working through the extensive evidence Ray had accumulated. Today, we dedicate this memorial not just to my father, but to the ideal he embodied, Elena continued. That truth matters. That justice, even delayed by decades, is worth fighting for. That sometimes the greatest heroism is not in dramatic rescues, but in quiet, determined resistance to wrongdoing. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of a posthumous Presidential Medal of Freedom for Ray Martinez, recognition of his extraordinary sacrifice in the face of systemic corruption. As the crowd dispersed, Elena remained by the monument, her fingers tracing the etched helmet. Sheriff Bradley approached, his expression solemn. "There's been a development," he said quietly. "We need to talk privately." At the sheriff's office, Bradley closed the door and activated a white noise generator, a security precaution that had become standard since they discovered how far the conspiracy's tendrils had reached. "Two things," he began, sliding a folder across his desk. "First, forensics completed analysis of the remaining documents from your father's cabin. They found something unusual in his personal journal." Elena opened the folder to find photocopied pages from a journal she recognized as her father's. The distinctive handwriting unchanged despite the decades. "Look at the entry from July 1986, the day before he disappeared," Bradley directed. Ray had written, "Meeting with S tonight. He says he has information about the fire station contracts that will blow the whole case open. Mentioned something about a Cold War relic beneath the forest. Said to come alone." Elena looked up, confusion evident in her expression. "This suggests my father already knew about the bunker before his disappearance. That he was meeting with someone, presumably Strauss, voluntarily." Bradley nodded grimly. "It contradicts everything we thought we knew about how he ended up in that bunker. If this entry is accurate, Strauss might not have kidnapped your father. Ray might have gone willingly to meet him." "That doesn't make sense," Elena protested. "Why would my father meet privately with someone he suspected of corruption?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Bradley replied. "This could change the entire narrative of what happened 25 years ago." The second development was equally disturbing. Surveillance footage from the hospital where Ray spent his final days showed an unauthorized visitor entering his room during the night shift, just hours before his death. The image quality was poor, but the figure moved with military precision, spending exactly 4 minutes in the room before disappearing. "The medical examiner found nothing suspicious," Bradley assured her. "Your father's death appears to have been from natural causes, consistent with his terminal diagnosis. But the timing? Someone wanted to make sure he died before he could reveal everything he knew," Elena finished, a cold certainty settling in her stomach. Bradley's expression confirmed her suspicion. "We think there might be more to the story than even your father revealed. Something he kept hidden from everyone, including you." For Elena, who had spent 25 years searching for truth, then one precious year reconnecting with her father before losing him again, this suggestion reopened wounds barely beginning to heal. "What are you saying? That my father was somehow complicit? That he wasn't just a victim?" Bradley shook his head. "I'm saying that heroism is rarely simple, and neither are heroes. Your father was a good man who sacrificed everything to expose corruption. But there might be chapters of his story that even he couldn't bring himself to tell. Not even at the end. As Elena drove home that evening, the forest darkness seemed to press closer against her car windows. The mystery of Ray Martinez, firefighter, father, exile, whistleblower, had deepened rather than resolved. In her mailbox, she found a small package with no return address. Inside, a key identical to the one found in the hollow tree, the one stolen from evidence, the one her father had used to unlock his cabin. Attached was a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Ray wasn't the only one watching from the woods. Some fires are still burning. Be careful where you step. The legacy of Blackwood Forest was not yet fully revealed. And for Elena Martinez, the search for truth, her father's truth, would continue. Winter descended on Pinecrest with unusual ferocity. Blackwood Forest disappeared beneath heavy snowfall. The trees transformed into silent sentinels draped in white. For the first time in 26 years, Elena Martinez didn't venture into those woods. The mysteries they still harbored could wait until spring, or so she thought. 3 months after the memorial ceremony, Elena was awakened by an urgent pounding on her door. Sheriff Bradley stood on her porch, snow swirling around him, his expression grave. "We found another bunker," he said without preamble. Despite the pre-dawn hour and hazardous road conditions, Elena found herself in Bradley's SUV, heading toward Blackwood Forest. Agent Cross joined them via secure video call, her face illuminated by artificial light in her Washington, D.C. office. "The snow actually helped us find it," Bradley explained as they navigated the treacherous roads. "One of my deputies noticed a patch of forest where the snow was melting in a perfectly circular pattern. Evidence of artificial heat from below." "Like the first bunker?" Elena asked, clutching a thermos of coffee to ward off both cold and fatigue. "No," Cross interjected from the screen. "Much more sophisticated. This isn't Cold War era. This is modern, state-of-the-art, and it's not on any government registry." The implications hung heavily in the car. If this bunker wasn't official, then who built it? And why? They arrived at a staging area where FBI tactical teams had established a perimeter. The circular melting pattern was clearly visible, approximately 30 feet in diameter in a section of forest nearly 2 miles from Ray's cabin. "We've confirmed it's unoccupied," the tactical team leader reported. "Entry was gained 2 hours ago. You won't believe what's down." There, the entrance was concealed beneath a false rock formation, a technological marvel that would be completely invisible during warmer months when no snow would melt to reveal its presence. Inside, a modern elevator descended 60 feet beneath the forest floor. The bunker itself defied all expectations. Unlike the utilitarian Cold War facility, this was a state-of-the-art command center. Computer servers hummed along one wall. Multiple workstations displayed data feeds. A sophisticated communications array occupied an adjacent room. Most shocking was the surveillance wall. Dozens of monitors showing various locations throughout Pinecrest. The town square, the sheriff's office, Elena's home, Ray's cabin, key intersections and public buildings. "Someone has been watching the whole town," Bradley murmured, staring at the monitors in disbelief. "Not someone," Elena corrected, pointing to a framed photograph mounted prominently beside the main console. "Something." The photo showed 3 men in military uniforms standing before a nondescript government building. The image was dated 1981, 5 years before Ray's disappearance. One of the men was a younger William Strauss. Another was unidentified. But the third— "That's my father," Elena whispered. Next to the photograph was a document in a protective case, an official-looking certificate with 3 signatures at the bottom. Though heavily redacted, the visible text identified the men as participants in something called Operation Watchfire. "This wasn't just about town corruption," Agent Cross said, surveying the sophisticated setup. "This facility alone would cost millions to build and maintain. No small-town embezzlement scheme could finance this." As the FBI's technical team worked to secure the servers and data, Elena wandered through the bunker, struggling to process what this discovery meant for her understanding of her father. In a small side room configured as private quarters, she found a bookshelf containing volumes on intelligence operations, surveillance techniques, and Cold War history, and a journal, not Ray's, but belonging to William Strauss. "Bradley!" she called, her voice unsteady. "You need to see this." The sheriff carefully donned evidence gloves before opening the journal. Inside, Strauss had documented decades of what appeared to be a parallel life to his public role in Pinecrest. According to the entries, Operation Watchfire was a classified domestic intelligence program established during the later Cold War years. Strauss, Ray Martinez, and a third man identified only as Archer were part of a specialized unit embedded in strategic locations throughout the country, ostensibly to monitor potential foreign influence in American communities. They were spies, Bradley realized, turning pages with increasing disbelief. Planted in Pinecrest as part of a government operation. Elena shook her head, rejecting the implication. "My father was a firefighter. He grew up in Arizona. He met my mother here in Pinecrest." Bradley pointed to a specific entry dated 1968, the year Ray supposedly arrived in town. Strauss had written, "M successfully established cover identity. Background fabrication holding under local scrutiny. Connection with Conley girl proceeding according to operational parameters. Archer concerned about emotional entanglement, but I see it as strengthening cover." "Your mother," Bradley said gently. Maria Conley. Elena's world tilted on its axis. The father she had spent her life searching for, the hometown hero forced into hiding by corruption, had apparently been an intelligence operative all along. His entire identity in Pinecrest had been a cover. But further journal entries revealed an even more complex truth. By 1984, Ray Martinez was no longer playing a role. He had genuinely fallen in love with Maria, treasured his daughter Elena, and embraced his life as a firefighter. When Operation Watchfire was officially discontinued in 1985, Strauss and Archer were reassigned, but Ray refused to leave. "MU has gone native," Strauss wrote in evident frustration. "Refuses extraction. Claims ethical objections to our secondary revenue operations." The UAHIM secondary revenue operations appeared to reference the embezzlement scheme, a side operation Strauss and Archer had established using their intelligence backgrounds to siphon federal funds meant for municipal projects. "My father discovered their scheme," Elena said, pieces falling into place. Not as a firefighter or council member, but as a former colleague who knew exactly what to look for. "And when he threatened to expose them," Bradley continued, "they used their intelligence training against him." The final pages of Strauss's journal had been written recently, entries continuing right up to the week before the standoff at Ray's cabin. In them, Strauss documented his growing paranoia about Ray's evidence collection and the potential exposure of not just the corruption scheme, but Operation Watchfire itself, an operation that had officially never existed and would embarrass powerful people still in government. The last entry was chilling in its clarity. "Martinez was one of us. He knew the code. You never break cover. You never betray the mission. When he chose that woman and their child over operational security, he signed his own exile order. Now his daughter has found the helmet, and everything we built is at risk. Archer wants her eliminated. I'm not sure I can control this situation anymore." Elena closed the journal, her hands trembling. "Who is Archer? Is he still out there?" Agent Cross, who had been examining other documents found in the bunker, approached with a tablet displaying a personnel file. "We think we've identified him," she said, showing Elena and Bradley the screen. Former intelligence operative James Fletcher officially retired in 1995, last known residence in northern Washington state. The photograph showed an elderly man with calculating eyes, the third man from the Operation Watchfire photo. "We've deployed teams to locate him," Cross continued. "But given his background, It's unlikely he'll be found unless he wants to be. As FBI technicians continued processing the hidden command center, Elena stepped outside into the snowy forest, needing space to absorb these revelations. Her breath fogged in the frigid air as she gazed up at the snow-laden trees of Blackwood Forest. The father she had idolized and searched for had been both more and less than she had believed. A spy who became a genuine hero. A man living a lie who found authentic purpose. An operative who chose family over mission, and paid for that choice with 25 years of exile. Sheriff Bradley joined her, offering silent companionship as snowflakes drifted around them. "Does this change how you feel about him?" he finally asked. Elena considered the question carefully, watching her breath dissipate into the winter air. "He could have left," she said eventually. "When the operation ended, he could have taken his skills anywhere. Instead, he chose to stay, to be my father, to be a firefighter, to protect this town. When he discovered what Strauss was doing, he could have just walked away. Instead, he stood and fought, and lost everything because of it." She turned to Bradley, her expression resolute despite the tears freezing on her cheeks. "Knowing this doesn't diminish what he did. It makes it more remarkable. He wasn't born Ray Martinez, but he chose to become him, chose to be the hero this town believed him to be." Bradley nodded, understanding. "And Archer? If we find him?" Elena's gaze hardened as she looked back toward the hidden bunker. The final piece of a conspiracy that had stolen her father twice. First his presence, then his truth. "Find him," she said simply. "My father deserves that much." As they returned to the bunker's entrance, Elena's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Your father broke the first rule. Never become your cover. I taught him better than that. But in the end, he was right. And we were wrong. Watch the North Ridge. A." Elena showed the message to Bradley, who immediately alerted tactical teams to investigate the North Ridge area. But Elena knew they would find nothing. Archer, whoever and whatever he truly was, would be long gone. Like her father, he was a ghost who knew how to vanish into the trees. Unlike her father, he remained in the shadows by choice. The truth about Ray Martinez, all of it, was finally emerging from darkness into light. And Elena found that knowing everything didn't diminish her father's legacy. It completed it. Spring returned to Blackwood Forest with tentative green buds and the gentle revival of wilderness after winter's long sleep. 1 year had passed since hunters found a weathered helmet half buried in pine needles, a discovery that had unraveled decades of secrets and changed Pinecrest forever. Elena Martinez stood at the edge of a small clearing, watching the morning mist rise from the forest floor. Here, construction crews had recently completed a modest pavilion, an open-air structure with benches and informational displays about forest conservation. Officially named the Ray Martinez Memorial Lookout, it served as both monument and practical resource for hikers and nature lovers. The true purpose of the location was known to only a handful of people. Beneath the pavilion's foundation lay the permanently sealed entrance to the second bunker, the high-tech command center that had housed Operation Watchfire's surveillance operation. After federal investigators had extracted all relevant evidence, the facility had been filled with concrete, erasing this physical reminder of the town's shadowed past. "Ready for the opening ceremony?" Sheriff Bradley asked, approaching from the newly constructed trail that made this once remote section of forest accessible to visitors. Elena nodded, adjusting her forest ranger uniform. As Pinecrest's newly appointed chief ranger, she had overseen the creation of this space, transforming a site of conspiracy into one of education and remembrance. "Have they found him yet?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Bradley shook his head. "Fletcher, or Archer, remains at large. Given his age and background, some investigators believe he may have already passed away, leaving that final text message as his last communication." Elena wasn't convinced. A man with Archer's training and resources could disappear completely if he chose to. just as her father had done for 25 years. The investigation into Operation Watchfire had sent shockwaves through certain federal agencies. 3 former intelligence directors had been questioned before congressional committees. Classified documents were being reviewed for potential declassification. The full story might take decades to emerge, if it ever did. For Pinecrest, the revelations had been both painful and cleansing. William Strauss was serving a lengthy federal sentence, as were several former officials involved in the corruption scheme. Former Mayor Kingsley, granted immunity for his cooperation, lived under witness protection, his reputation destroyed but his freedom intact. "The Attorney General is here," Bradley noted, gesturing toward the parking area where official vehicles were arriving for the ceremony. Along with the FBI director and half the state government, from the looks of it. The high-profile nature of the case, a small-town corruption scheme that uncovered a classified intelligence operation gone rogue, had captured national attention. Ray Martinez was being hailed as a whistleblower and hero in equal measure. Documentaries and books about the case were already in production. But for Elena, the public narrative only captured part of the truth. The complex man who was her father couldn't be reduced to either spy or hero. He was both, and something more. A person who had found his genuine self within a fabricated identity, who had chosen love and principle over mission and obligation. As townspeople and dignitaries gathered for the dedication ceremony, Elena slipped away, following a narrow game trail that led to the 3 fused pine trees, nature's anomaly that had marked the location of her father's cabin. The structure itself was gone now, carefully dismantled after yielding its evidence. But Elena had arranged for this spot to remain unmarked, unmentioned in any official map or guided tour. Some places deserved to remain known only to those who had earned the knowledge. At the base of the fused trees, Elena knelt and brushed aside forest debris, revealing a small bronze plaque embedded in stone, a private marker she had commissioned with her own funds. Here stood a watcher in the woods, who chose truth over safety, family over duty, justice over peace. The forest remembers what others forget. From her pocket, she withdrew the key to her father's cabin, the 3rd such key to surface during the investigation. The FBI had determined it opened nothing remaining in the forest, but had allowed her to keep it as a personal memento. "I understand now, Dad," she said quietly to the empty forest. "Why you stayed, why you watched from a distance all those years." The forest offered no response, but the whisper of wind through pine needles. Yet Elena felt a sense of completion, of having finally assembled all the fragments of her father's legacy into a coherent whole. A twig snapped somewhere behind her. Elena turned, half expecting to see Sheriff Bradley coming to escort her back to the ceremony. Instead, she glimpsed a figure standing at the edge of her vision, an elderly man observing from a distance. Their eyes met briefly across the clearing. He offered a solemn nod before stepping backward into the trees, vanishing as completely as if he had never been there at all. Elena didn't call out or pursue. Some ghosts deserved their privacy, their chosen exile. Whether the figure was Archer paying final respects to a former colleague, or simply her imagination giving form to unresolved questions, didn't ultimately matter. The truth about Ray Martinez had finally emerged from decades of shadows. His daughter had found not just answers, but understanding. Justice had been served to those who had stolen her father's life and corrupted her hometown. As Elena made her way back to the gathering at the new pavilion, she felt the weight of her lifelong search finally lifting. The forest would keep its remaining secrets, as it had for generations before this mystery, and would for generations to come. But one truth would now be preserved in both official records and town memory. A firefighter had disappeared in 1986, and 25 years later, what hunters found in the forest had changed everything, revealing both corruption and heroism, both deception and profound authenticity. Ray Martinez had shown that sometimes a person's truest self emerges from within their deepest cover, and that the most important things worth protecting aren't locked in bunkers or hidden in forests, but carried in the hearts of those who remember, and those who never stop searching for truth. If this story left you as impacted as it did me, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and comment your opinion below. Each comment is like a new piece that can help unravel other mysteries like this one.